Okay, so we've got basically the nest is all assembled. So we've got our belt that we pulled in earlier. We've threaded it through the system, loosen up your rollers, feed it through. So we're in through the rollers. We've already cut our angles for our overlap. Now we're going to add extra holes along the outside edge. And in order to get that pattern right, we're going to take our off-fall piece that we had from cutting our edges, and we're going to take a marker. So we're going to use our off-fall piece and line up our holes in the belt so we keep our pattern the same. We're going to use the third row in. You basically put your fingers in there and hold it tight together, and we're going to draw the holes in. We're going to do 7 holes back. So now we're going to use a step bit and drill those out. So both of our belts, both ends of our belt are rounded and arrowed. So we wanted to round this, we want to get rid of this peak point. You know, as far as cutting your angle, you're going to end up with a point. We want to round that off to try to eliminate any catch points. We did the same on our corners down here. We just slightly rounded them, just took the sharp edge off. Did that on all 4 edges. So the next thing that we're going to do is our underside of the belt, which is coming from the nest to the drive roller, is going to go on the bottom side. We're going to overlap. We're going to use the pre-drill holes. We're going to overlap 8 holes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then whenever we start lacing, we're not going to line the holes straight up, we want to overlap the holes. Okay, so I've started my first row of lacing, and as you can see, I actually started ahead of the lace. So I've got my lacing material in a hole here. I come up through, and then I come down and I catch the front edge of that belt. So now I've got a good bite on that belt, so it won't catch anything as it's traveling along the surface of the tray that it sets in. So I've just gone up and down. So basically the lacing is going through the same hole 2 times because we're overlapping our holes. This hole I went down and now I'm coming back up in the same hole, but the opposite side of the lace or the splice is catching the belt. One thing that helps is when you cut your splice material or your lacing material, to put a little arrow on the end of it. It'll feed through a little easier for you. And then the main thing to remember once you actually get started and going on this is to keep, every time you pull that through, make sure you pull that good and tight. So we've already started our splicing. We've got our outside one, which we just weaved it the way it is. The inside rows, we're starting basically the 3rd hole ahead of the lap. So we're using the back side of that 3rd hole, under, over, under, and then we're catching this front lip. So we're pulling it tight against the top side of the belt. And then we're doing some random across just to make sure that we get our belt all straight and even. And then whenever you start your next, to get your splicing the length that you need, so we're going to go 3 holes ahead. So we're going to go from the back of the splice to the 3rd hole. We're going to do that 3 times. And that's going to be really close to the right length that you need. And then we'll use a 10 snips to cut that. And as far as all of our cuts on the belt, we use a 10 snips. You could use a utility knife. 10 snips seems to be the easiest and safest way to do it. So we've got our belt completely spliced. We've got all of our tails just weaved in here. If you can weave them in, you can cut them off. It's not gonna hurt any either way. Just don't cut them too short that they would unweave themselves out of the actual splice itself. When you get your drive system here for the egg belt, it's going to come, and these bearing bolts are gonna be tight, as well as the bolt that holds this spring in place. After you've got your belt pulled through, laced through the roller system, get your splice done. As soon as you're done with the splice, you want to loosen these bolts as well as loosen this bolt so the spring can do its job. If you need to make tracking adjustments to your belt, if it's running too far to the left or too far to the right, you need to loosen. There's 8 bolts that need loosened. So loosen these two, these two, these two, and these two. So it's a total of 8 bolts. And then this bolt here is how you adjust your tracking, either forwards or backwards, depending on which way you need it to track. So when we refer to the weighted roller, this is what we're talking about. We've got our small rollers up here in the system that we installed while we was doing the framework. Our weighted roller, once our belt is in and we're ready to connect the 2 ends together, you're gonna put your weighted roller in. We're gonna actually, whenever we did the splice, we blocked this up towards the top of the system so we can get our splice in. And then once your splice is done, you can let your splice go, and that will take up any slack that's in the system. Okay, so we're just gonna kind of do a little bit of a review of the system here. This is our weighted roller. This is, in a perfect world, exactly where we want it to run. While the system's running, whenever it shuts off, it's gonna pull up a little bit. We just don't want it up so high that it's fiddle string tight and the roller can't move easily. Once you get to the floor, the roller gets down towards the floor. We want to remove a length of belt out of there so we can get that back up here into a manageable position. So to continue on from our roller, we've added our end panels here to the end of the nest row. The bottom section, it just slides into the groove just like our backs do. So that sets in. This top piece just gets screwed on. And the access door here, there's fingers on the bottom. You line those up, flip it up, pick it up just slightly, and it'll catch in. Okay, to continue on, just a reminder that these adapters go on the end walls where there's a crossover, where there's the expeller panels, whatever, so those just get bolted in between the cross arm and the front panel. We're gonna continue on down the nest. We've got our stops so the rooftop don't slide off. Those get mounted upside down. Our curtains, again, those can be mounted in 2 different positions, or you can roll those up and give the birds some access when you're first training them into the nest. It's a personal preference on how that is handled. We've got our fronts in, which also lock into the nest pads. Again, we've got our expansion joint in the roof. Technically, it's every 10 sections or every 5 nests. Same difference both ways. Different people refer to it different ways, so that's why I'm saying it both ways for you. That goes in there for expansion and contraction of the barn temperatures. Our expellers with our adapters go in here. And it's just a repeat of the nest system all the way. Okay, so we're at the back end of our nest. We've got our back crossover, per se. We've got our access point to get into the nest egg belt, mainly just for observation purposes. Keeps the birds out. Our expeller pipes, you want to make sure that those are sealed off for biosecurity purposes. Our idler for our egg belt here, we want to make sure our spacer is in there so that drive or the idler roller is back as far as we can go. Make sure our locking collars are on tight. Make sure our nuts are to the outside, so if that belt ever tracks around too much, that's never an issue of catching or wearing on anything. All right, and that is pretty much our review of our Valco community nest system. If you have any questions or concerns, please feel free to contact Valco Tech Support.